Hi, I'm John Geyer. Alex has asked me to record a few memories for posterity, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what year were you born? When were you born?
I was born in 1927 in Los Angeles, California. I was born 1 month before Lindbergh flew the Atlantic. Your audience may never have heard of Lindbergh, but he was very big.
Oh, I've heard of
in
it, yeah.
my day. Also, Los Angeles was it was a city, but it was a small city entirely surrounded by orange groves, except on the side that had the ocean. It's very different now. One other interesting fact may be that when I lived there, when I was born, Wyatt Earp was still alive and lived about, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles from where I never saw him. And I didn't even know that till years later, but he was still alive and lived not far from where I lived.
What do you remember about the Great Depression at all? If you recall anything.
I remember it well. I was alive during the whole thing. It was a difficult time for a lot of people. People were really hungry then. There was no, I don't believe, well, once Roosevelt came in, he established work programs. The PWA, the WPA, and a lot of work programs, and people got work and money that way. But there was no welfare where you just signed up for it, except the churches did a lot. And neighbors helped each other a lot. You had to. My mother had, we always had, the kids always played in my yard because it was a big yard. And she always called them in for a bowl of soup or a bowl of chili or something, because a lot of them weren't getting a lot of food. She also cut their hair. She gave them haircuts, saved them a little money. It was a hard time. But for me, it's just the way the world was, because I didn't remember it before. It was just the way things were.
Can you please, retell your story about seeing a Zeppelin fly over your house?
Yeah, I remember going over. We were out in the back lot, just playing. I don't remember what, but playing what we were usually playing. And it went over. And we all stopped what we were doing and watched it. It was way up in the sky, but it still was huge. They were just huge things. We were used to seeing the blimp. The blimps went over all the time. They still do in places. I don't think there are any more Zeppelins. But
Okay, let's move on.
sure.
All right. And what years did you serve in the military?
Well, that's kind of a double question. I first was in the Merchant Marine during the war and after. And in that day, I mean, for the purposes of the war, the Merchant Marine was considered a service. Normally it isn't. Normally it's just a job. But we wore a uniform and we're veterans and all that. Then after the war, I joined the National Guard, and I was in that for 14 years. So all told, I must have spent like 17 or 18 years in the two. But none of them was like being in the Army or being in the Navy. It was always some kind of half a thing.
Yeah, I was going to eventually ask you what you did for a living after the war, but that
I was a college student until I graduated, and then I had to work for a couple of years to get enough money to go back. And I went back with my teaching credential, and I was a high school teacher for a long time.
Did you choose to join the Merchant Marines?
Oh yeah, I didn't draft to the Merchant Marine, except that if you weren't in something, you'd get drafted. So in that sense, I did. It was the fastest way in, and I wanted to see something of the world. I was 17, so, and I thought that was a way to see the world, and I did. I saw a lot of the world while I was a seaman. I only made, the war was almost over. I was 17 and in high school. And I could have stayed there until I graduated. And as it turned out, the war would have been over at that point. I didn't know that at the time, and it wouldn't have made much difference. The war was on, everybody was doing things like that, so I quit high school and went to sea. And I sailed for 3 years, but only the first trip while the war was on. After that, it was just being a sailor, seaman. It's interesting. It's something that a lot of kids didn't get a chance to do.
Well, what was your job when you were a Merchant Marine?
I was an ordinary seaman, a deckhand.
Like, just what did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, at sea you stand sea watches, and you stand lookout, and you do a wheel watch, turn on the wheel, and turn and standby. In port, you go on to day work, and you're just a worker. You chip paint and paint. You spend a lot of time fighting rust, with painting and chipping rust off, and working with lines and to do whatever they tell you to do. Essentially, it wasn't anything magic.
All right. Do any experiences from when you were a Merchant Marine, does anything stand out? Anything you remember really well?
Oh yeah. My first trip, the one that I made when the war was still on, well, the way you get a ship in the Merchant Marine, once you're a seaman, is you go to the Union Hall and put in your card with a date on it, and as the date gets older and older, then you're allowed to, the ships are put on the board, the ones that need crew, and people put in for a job and the oldest card gets it. So you have a little bit of choice, but during the war you didn't know where you were going or anything about it. All you knew was the kind of ship it was. And I figured I didn't want to get on a tanker. I mean, to sit on 10,000 gallons of gasoline when the submarines are out there didn't impress me as being a smart thing to do. So I thought, well, I'll get a freighter, and we'll carry all the things that freighters carry, and that'll be better. So I threw in my card on a freighter, and I got it. And we went up to Benicia in California, which was the Great Armory, and we loaded up the freighter, 5 holds full of 1,000-pound bombs. And the whole thing was a bomb ship. And we flew a red flag, which in those days was called Baker, today it'd be called Bravo, and it meant explosives, And so I might have been better off on the gasoline, I don't know. But either one probably wouldn't have been too pleasant. But I never had any problem. I never got shot at. I thought I did one night. One night I was on watch, like maybe 2 in the morning, something like that. And we're down in the South Pacific, and the water is very fluorescent. Just any disturbance in the water really made a lot of light by all the fluorescence. And I saw this wake coming at the ship, this bright, shiny, fluorescent wake coming straight at the ship. I thought, my God, that's a torpedo. And I hit the general alarm. I was on watch. I hit the general alarm buttons, and started to run aft. Why? Because nobody would have lived for about a 10-mile radius of that ship had gone up, but I ran aft anyway, and nothing happened. And the mate saying, "What's going on?" The crew is turning out, the gun crews are, everybody's disturbed, and so we go up the bow, and there's a porpoise swimming up there. And I have found out later that happened to a lot of people. Porpoises were commonly, not commonly maybe, but often called in as torpedoes. They look like it. All you can see is this wake coming at you. It's coming at you in a straight line. They swam toward the bow of ships because they like to play in the water in the bow. And so that's frightened me a little bit. That's the closest I came to anything dangerous. Other than that, we had no problems, which was fortunate. We went to Tinian and unloaded the bombs and came home. Then my second ship, the war was over, and I got a ship to Japan, and we went in there just a few weeks after the war was over. Just maybe a couple of months. We were one of the first merchant ships into Yokohama Harbor, and we were strange. Everybody thought we were strange, even the Americans, because we were in civilian clothes. To see Occidental Americans, obviously, in civilian clothes was unusual. To see them in uniform, they were all over, but not in civilian clothes. And even the soldiers thought we were, "What's this guy, what are they doing here?" And they hadn't seen many merchant ships yet at that time. But I got to see Japan when it was destroyed. I saw what all those bombs that I carried over in the ship before had done when they were dropped. And they just destroyed the place. I mean, the cities were rubble, just rubble. By the time I got there, they got the roads cleared, so the roads were roads, but the buildings were just rubble. And then I made trips I made one trip to Africa, and one trip to Italy, and Puerto Rico, and I saw quite a bit of the world. It was a nice experience. I did that for like 3 years, and then I quit and went to we call it a junior college, today they call it community colleges, which allowed me to go, although I didn't have a high school diploma. And so I finished there and life went on. That was my war experience, one ship. But maybe a veteran, nice. So I'm glad for whatever that's worth. It's worth a lot to a lot of people. It's never been worth much to me. I've never had to use it. I never had to go to a VA hospital or something like that. It's not your first choice, usually.
Do you remember what went through your mind when you heard the news that the war ended?
Oh, yes. For me, it was VJ that was important. VE, the European part, was kind of interesting, but I did all my war was, I was in California, so it was all in the Pacific. And I was on a ship in a harbor, and all of a sudden, the ships all around, all over the harbor began blowing their horns and their whistles. And the mate was up there, and I asked him, what's that about? He said, well, I think the war's over. And I said, can I blow the horn? He said, yeah, it's over. Blew the horn. That was a great day, sure. Everybody was very eager for the war to be over.
Do you remember what it was like when you heard that the war had actually started?
When it started?
Yes.
Yes. I was 14. I was hunting duck with an uncle of mine and my brother, and we were having lunch. We shot duck in the morning. We're back up having a sack lunch by the car, and somebody turned on the car radio for some music, and they broke in, and it said the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I don't know, it didn't strike us I mean, we knew that was important and we knew that meant war, but we didn't know what any of that meant, or at least I didn't. You know, I'd never been around war. And actually it was kind of exciting, you know, well, we're going to have something interesting happen here, you know. We didn't really know what we were getting into. I didn't. I suppose a lot of people did. There are a lot of war veterans still around. My dad was one. World War I veterans. And so they knew what it was like.
Do you remember what the World War I veterans told you, were telling you after the war?
Oh, yeah.
You know, we can't really talk to them.
Yeah, the people were very much against war. I mean, World War I had been a terrible war. Just an unbelievably terrible war for the people in it. And it had been fought for no purpose that anybody could see and understand and approve of. It just was a waste. And so the country was determined not to do that again. And they didn't want to get involved in any European wars. That was the big thing. Now, at that time, I was a page boy in Congress. So I was there when all the build-up to the war occurred. I left Congress in October of '41 before Pearl Harbor, but I'd seen most of it. And the congressmen were, except for 3 or 4, all male and of an age where most of them had been in World War I. And they were just determined not to go to war. I don't think anything would have gotten into a war except to be attacked. And that just changed everybody overnight. They went from being 100% against war to 100%. You know, they just would not allow themselves to be attacked. I don't think the country has ever been so unified in what they were doing than World War II. I mean, everybody was involved in the war. That's all. For 4 years, that's all anybody talked about or thought about. And it was, you know, they were all for it. They wanted to win. They wanted it to be over, but they wanted it to be over after winning. You know? Yeah, it was a unique time. It may not be unique. It may have been earlier times, but everybody agreed. You know, that's pretty hard to find.
Do you remember how people talked about World War I and what the view of World War I was before World War II?
Yeah.
Before that had started at all?
They didn't talk about it too much. We used to try to get the guys who were in there to talk about it. And just because we were boys and wanted to hear the stories. And, you know, they just wouldn't do it. Different wars, the guys handled it different.
Bye. Okay.
Veterans handled it differently. World War II, the thing they did was tell stories. Everybody had funny stories of things that happened. That's the way they got through it. The World War I, the thing was they didn't talk about it. I said, oh, we don't talk, it's too terrible, we don't talk about it. So they didn't talk about it, you didn't hear very much about it. I had a Sunday school teacher who had been in combat, and we used to try to get him to tell us stories instead of teaching the Sunday school lesson. And he did, sometimes he did. They were terrible. It was just, World War I was a terrible war for the people in it. I think worse than World War II, well, it depended on what you did. World War II was terrible for lots of people. Well, in 1939, the Germans invaded Poland. That's usually considered the start of World War II. But before that, there was a lot of fighting. The Russians invaded Finland. I remember that. That was my first experience with propaganda. And I was shocked. Because every day it seemed we got this new thing that the Finns had destroyed the Russian something or other division, and the Finns were winning, and then all of a sudden the Finns surrendered. I thought, that's crazy. They won the whole time and now they're surrendering, you know. But it was just propaganda. That was the first time I'd experienced that, where, you know, you couldn't necessarily believe everything you read in the paper or heard on the radio. It got worse. It still is.
Oh, yeah, much worse. All right. Well, now that you've lived through all of this, like you were born in when the U.S. was at its best, right? The Roaring '20s. You were there when it was at its worst. You were there through all of this stuff. You experienced World War II. You saw the boom of the internet and the invention of computers. You saw all of this.
Yeah.
Are you happy with what the world has become? Are you happy with with the changes?
Well, some aspects of them, certainly. But I think overall I'm not terribly happy. I think TV has done a lot of damage to the country. Not TV, but the way it's used. The internet, I don't know. The internet, I think, it's there to be used, just like the library, you know. Depends on how you use it and if you use it. Of course, more people use the internet, use the library, I think. But it just is what it is. And I think it's marvelous. I think the internet's marvelous. And I think information, by and large, is good. It's not terribly trustworthy. It's not trustworthy at all.
All right.
So I'm not happy what's happened to this country. I think we've gone downhill. I think if we look at a period in time like 1950, well, I started teaching high school in 1956, and I taught civics and U.S. history. And I started both of those classes. The first thing I said was that you guys live in a country that is the richest, strongest, most powerful, and freest of any country that has ever existed anywhere at any time. And I think that was true in 1956. I would not tell them that today. I think we've lost a lot of our freedoms. We certainly lost a lot of our power. And our wealth is down the tubes unless we do something to change it. So I think that's all been negative. I think that's all been a very negative change. I don't know who to blame. I think when we turned it over to the next generation, that was true. So I guess I have to blame the next generations for that. I don't know. Well, I just think we've gone downhill a long ways. I think we can recoup. I think we can recover. But we're going to have to get busy if we're going to. And we're not getting busy. You know, people are. It's not the same. It's the way it is. You live with what you have.
What do you like? The world has changed overall, like as a whole.
The world.
Just everything. Just.
Yeah. No, but there was lots not to like about it. At any time in history, there's always problems. Always things not to like about it. I don't know if I like it better now than then. The world.
They're just about the same. Like.
It's just I don't think I really can't answer that question.
Okay. That's fine. Makes sense.
I can about this country because this is specific and this is where I live and this is the country I belong to. But I can't. I have a hard time making judgments about England or Japan or other countries. They do what they want to do for their own reasons, and they don't really care whether I like it or not. And they're not doing their thing for my benefit.
Okay, on a slightly lighter note.
I'm sorry?
On a lighter note.
Okay, yeah, let's lighten up a
Just,
bit.
what do you think of Donald Trump's presidential campaign?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I ask myself frequently. And I might, whatever I tell you today, I might very well change my mind tomorrow. The thing I like best about him are that he isn't any of those others. I like the fact that he's not a professional politician. I've kind of had it with professional politicians for a while. I think it's our system. I think there's lots of very good people who are professional politicians, but they have to deal with the system. And our system has gotten to the point, well, for instance, to run for president, you have to raise millions and millions of dollars. And that means you have to go to people who have lots and lots of money. And that means they're not giving you money for nothing. That means you've got to make a lot of promises that may be the exact opposite of what you're telling the voters. And very likely you're the exact opposite. So I just don't trust politicians anymore. They're all sold out because they don't have any other way to survive. So one thing I like about Trump is he's so rich he can't be bribed. Now, most of my life that would not be a good thing in a presidential. I would not vote for a billionaire. But I think now, given our current system of government, that's a good thing. Because he at least is not selling out. He doesn't have to sell out. I mean, there isn't anybody who can buy him. So that's good. And his ideas that he has announced, I agree with by and large. At least as much as I agree with anybody else's. So if I had to vote today, I'd probably vote for him. In fact, but whether I will still feel that way when it's time for the election, I don't know.
It's a long way.
Yeah, it's a long way.
It's
a long ways away. But what I said, though, will still be true. That's the problem. They still had to raise, the others have had to raise millions of dollars. They spend billions, not individuals, but the campaign, the total campaign. My father ran for Congress. This is during the Depression. But he ran for Congress the first time. He spent $600 to win it. Actually, it wasn't the first time he ran, the first time he lost. But the first time he won, he spent a total of $600, that's all. Everything he did was voluntary. He had all these people volunteering, going door to door. Everything was voluntary in those days. He spent every night out speaking. The churches, the American Legion halls, all of that, set up programs where all the candidates came and spoke together and debated each other.
So I need to.
That's the way campaigns were run now. But they don't do it that way anymore.
Tell us your part in bringing the Beatles to America.
Very well. This was all stemmed from the homecoming, which is a very, very big celebration at UCLA with many, many parts. And I was a special assistant to the homecoming chairman, so I had a lot of these parts under my control. And one of them, this seems like a long way in, but it's all part of it. One of them was that traditionally we had a homecoming king and a homecoming queen. Now the homecoming queen was a very big deal. Those girls, that was a very big deal. They often ended up with movie tryouts, you know. So that was a big deal. But Homecoming King was nothing. That was just somebody to take him to the dance. But this time, Paramount Studios, and UCLA had a lot to do with the studios. They did a lot of things together. Paramount said they had a movie just coming out called The Great Lover. And they suggested we set up a contest, and it would call, instead of Homecoming King, we'd call him The Great Lover. And we'd set up a contest, and the guy who won it would get to tour Paramount Studios and have a date with Elizabeth Taylor. Now this is the young Elizabeth Taylor. She only made about 1 or 2 movies, but this wasn't the glamour queen of some years later. This is when she was starting out, but she was very beautiful. Anyway, so we said, yeah, we can do that. That sounded like fun. So it was my job to do all this, and I had a helper, and my helper's name was Betty Sullivan. She was a student there and worked on the Homecoming, and she and I were pretty good friends, and she happened to be Ed Sullivan's daughter. See how we're getting into the Beatles? Anyway, the guy who won the Great Lover contest, oh dear, I'm not sure I can come up with his name. Bob somebody, it'll come to me. Anyway, he won, so Betty and I and he and Elizabeth didn't come in early. The 3 of us went and toured Paramount Studios and kind of spent the day, and then Elizabeth, okay. After he married Betty Sullivan, he became producer of the Ed Sullivan Show. And it was the Ed Sullivan Show that brought the Beatles over, and it was Bob Preck's, I understood this, I wasn't there, but I understood it was Bob Preck's idea. He had seen them and liked them. Ed Sullivan liked the old stuff, you know, he liked Tried and True. It was a very famous show, but he liked the Tried and True. Bob Preck kind of liked things a little more modern, and nobody had ever heard of the Beatles and in this country. And he talked him into bringing them over. And so if I hadn't, picked him as the great lover and all of that, never would have happened.
Did Bob Preck win honestly, or did you help it a little bit?
Well, he was a very popular kid and was a good candidate for it, but he was also a fraternity brother of mine, and that probably helped a little bit. I mean, a few extra ballots might have got in there somehow. They sometimes did that, you know. Probably, I would think, although I wouldn't want to go to court over it or anything like that. But anyway, that's the way he met his wife, and I think he became a producer in Hollywood. It may still be, I don't know. Oh, he's retired by now. I've never been in one of these big cruise ships. I never wanted to be. Yes. I mean, who wants to go on vacation with a city? But other people do. But I went on a freighter when I went on a trip. But I'm off the topic.
That doesn't matter. But also about those cruise ships, because you're stuck with all of those people for however long.
And when you hit the port, several thousand people are going ashore, so the prices of everything, like triple when the liner's in port. And I never thought that was a guy. I took a cruise on just a regular freighter, and it was fun. I enjoyed that.